Hey all, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our video review of the Smartisan Nut Pro 2. This is a premium mid-end smartphone that retails for around $400, and you're getting a Snapdragon 660 processor, which is octa-core clocked at 2 GHz, coupled with 6 gigs of built-in RAM, and one of the most stunning and innovative designs both in the software and the hardware that I've seen out of any smartphone, let alone 2018. So let's take a closer look, starting with the build first. So Smartisan is a company that stands for Smart Artisan, and to capitalize on the artisan craftsmanship, their logo is actually a hammer. It's a very interesting company because they create petite and usually high-end smartphones that sets it apart from the norm, as well as the mass of Android devices. Their designs are always thoughtful and thought-provoking. In this case, they wanted to emphasize on minimalism. So on the back, you can see there's actually a secondary lens for the camera that captures depth information, so you can use it for capturing bokeh shots, but it's as small as the LED flash. In fact, it's the same size, so they tried to disguise the second camera just to make it visually appealing. The back is also home to one of the largest fingerprint scanners I've seen on any smartphone in terms of surface area, and that results in an extremely sensitive experience. Just simply pick it up and the phone's display will unlock. It's fast, it's responsive, and it's fluid. On the front, Smartisan continues with the thoughtful design by hiding the earpiece onto this tiny little crack between the glass and the bezels. They also have hid the proximity light sensor as well as the LED light, and all you have is a front-facing camera. So it presents, again, a very elegant overall design that is well thought out as well as distinctive. On the bottom of the phone, you have access to a USB Type-C port, which also supports Quick Charge 3.0, along with the microphone and the speaker. Sandwiched between a delicate gold trim on the left-hand side is a special hotkey that will launch a feature called Quick Pills. We'll discuss that more in more detail later on in this video. On the other side, you have access to dedicated volume rockers and a power switch. All of these buttons are incredibly tactile and responsive, as well as being easy to use. And up front, we have a 6-inch display with that new 2:1 aspect ratio, same as on the Xiaomi Redmi 5 Plus and the crop of current Android flagships. It also employs very small bezels on the left and right-hand edge, as well as pretty small bezels on the top and the bottom. In addition, it has a full HD Plus resolution, which is sharp, it's vibrant, and as an IPS display, it also packs incredible viewing angles for seamless viewing even at extreme degrees and tilts. So taking a quick look at the software now, the Smartisan OS is definitely, again, one of the most unique launchers that we've seen out of any Android phone. You'll see a little spinning dot on the top. This is actually the face recognition feature. It actually is pretty accurate and quickly unlocks just by taking a look at your face. Even under darker environments, it tends to work well. So it provides an alternative mode of unlocking the phone if you don't want to use the fingerprint scanner. Taking a look at the home screens, what you'll immediately notice is that there isn't a consolidated app tray. Instead, we have just unlimited pages that we can populate with our favorite apps and programs. Smartisan OS also doesn't give you the ability to add widgets. That was one of the more distinctive elements of Android, especially when it was first released. So it gives you a very iOS-like feel. It's quite neat and elegant, but also very far from stock or vanilla Android. One of the interesting features is I can actually swipe from any corner of the device's display, and as you open up other apps, they will also be showing up on the side, so it gives you an easier way of multitasking and quickly launching back and forth between different types of apps. This is a pretty seamless experience and actually reminds me a lot of Ubuntu Touch, which was Canonical's mobile operating system that has unfortunately since been discontinued, but it does have a very interesting overall look. The benefits of having this bar, not only are you able to very quickly multitask, but you can quickly drag specific features. Let's say like this image, I can drag it up to images, I can save it as a clipboard, and then when I go back into a different app, like a messaging app, for instance, I can then easily save and share what I've clipped. So it gives you a lot of functionality to play around with, and again, I can also put it onto the other side of the screen. So it reminds me a lot of a desktop OS that they've implemented onto the software of a mobile device, which I think is actually very cool from a tech perspective. All right, so going back to that hot launch key that I was talking about earlier, it's called Smart Pills. So this is something translated in Chinese, but when I tap on this, it basically opens up little pills on the side of the screen, which are basically voice memos. The concept is, as we go through our day-to-day, we have a lot of ideas as well as notes that we might commonly have, but by the time that we open up a notepad on our phone, it might be too late. We may have already lost inspiration, something like that. So if you are a creator, if you're an artist, what you can do even when the phone's display is off is you can just hold on the pill key for a few seconds, and it'll instantly start recording your voice. Afterwards, you're able to translate or transcribe speech to text, and it actually does this very well. It will parse through your speech and it will translate them into characters. Unfortunately, because Smartisan is a company that is primarily invested in Chinese demographics at the moment, this is not a feature that you'll be able to access in other languages, such as English. So all of your speech needs to be in Chinese. But afterwards, what you're able to do is you can actually take a look at the text, you can listen to the sound, and I can send either the text or the audio to friends and family using social media. I can also use this as a checklist. So for instance, I can say specific words like ketchup, or I can say cheeseburger, and those will be things on my checklist that I want to do. So what I'm able to do is actually check off these little boxes, and you can see the lines getting crossed out to create this kind of virtual checklist of sorts. I can also rearrange these cards or pills by shuffling them back and forth in terms of the sequential order. So it gives me a lot of different options of either using this for notes, for creativity, for transcription, so on and so forth. So it's actually a pretty smart feature that they built right on in. So other elements of Smartisan OS that are very unique include the shortcut for opening up your multitasking apps. It's definitely different from stock Android 7.0 or Android 8.0, and it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it does work fairly well in my opinion. There's also access to quick shortcuts for changing things like notifications, software, as well as wireless options, and there's even a nighttime vision mode that will instantly turn off the blue light on the display just to make it slightly easier on your eyes. And there's even a keep screen on mode, which basically will keep the display turned on as long as you're looking at the screen, which is kind of a feature borrowed from Samsung, in my opinion. But again, you have access to all of these shortcuts at a click of a key. So basically, the drag down notification shade is dedicated only for notifications. So it simplifies things in that sense. One thing that you won't find on the Nut Pro is access to a lot of the standard Google tools as well as shortcuts. So for instance, usually if you long hold on the home key, that will bring up Google Assistant. But on here, it's actually not built on in. So as long as you hold on this, nothing will happen. You can still install Assistant yourself, but it's interesting that's not built on here. Furthermore, because Smartisan was originally releasing this phone in China, Google services are actually banned there. So exporters like YourBest have actually put on custom software that has installed some of the standard Google utilities, such as Google Photos. You also find access, of course, to the standard Chrome browser, as well as to YouTube and the Play Store. On the plus side, you're now able to directly access and download any of the games and apps that you would want from the store. On the downside, they've tampered with the original code, and as a result, you're actually unable to get OTA software updates from the manufacturer, which is a little bit unfortunate. The camera is also very interesting. There are two apps. The second one that's called Camera is basically the Google app. So we have access to a very stock experience if you've used a Pixel phone or a Google Launcher-based device. And it gives you access to things like panorama, photosphere, lens blur. It's very interesting that it's built right on in out of the box. And it is a very stock vanilla experience. Not too much settings to play around with, but pretty fun and easy to use. There's also the Smartisan designed camera app, which is the official one. It reminds me a little bit of a iOS, again, based interface. And what's interesting here is if you face the phone down, the accelerometer knows that you might be pointing, let's say, at the ground. If it's in your pocket, something like that, it's actually going to try and lock the camera so it's not going to take accidental images as you're fumbling around with the phone. But once you lift it up, it's actually going to deactivate the lock. The best thing about the camera is that it focuses incredibly quickly and it has very little shutter lag, so you're able to get shots in very quickly. The primary lens, which is 13 megapixels, also packs in sufficient detail as well as good color saturation, which I'll show you later on in some sample images. The interface also allows me to capture video, but only at 1080p, not 4K, unfortunately. I can also capture slow motion, time lapse, as well as bokeh, which works surprisingly well with the secondary lens. This is a good opportunity to take a look at the display as well as some sample shots. You can even change things like the color temperature of the screen if you want to under settings. There's plenty of details that you can customize and fine-tune with Smartisan OS, which is actually, in my opinion, one of the most unique launchers that you can find on an Android device these days. So you can see here that in terms of colors and close-up shots, it captures sufficient details, and overall I would say it's pretty accurate looking. It doesn't tend to oversaturate or overproduce your shots. The camera is quick to focus, and even if you zoom all the way in, you can see plenty of detail that you can crop around with. Definitely is one of the better cameras on a smartphone, I would say, for under $400, especially in outdoor environments with plenty of light. This is, again, a very well-performing camera that you won't have any complaints at all when snapping images on the fly. And a few other shots, you can just really tell how vibrant the colors turn out on this device. The camera also has an auto HDR mode, which works surprisingly well. It's right up there with Samsung and Apple in terms of detecting when the correct scene should be used to apply the HDR effect. And again, it just pulls in highlights and from the shadows and does overall, again, a pretty good job, I would say. So again, the camera quality, really no complaints on this device. I would say maybe it's not quite up to the par of the absolute best of the best, including, let's say, the Samsung Galaxy S9 or the iPhone 10, in terms of performing equally as well in low light situations where it may struggle a little bit more to capture more details. But in outdoor shots, it definitely is one of the better cameras that I've seen of late. Alright, so next let's take a quick look at the web browsing performance. It has dual band Wi-Fi, and you can see that it's loaded up in no time at all. A very powerful web browsing experience coupled with an excellent display. You really enjoy the way that content looks on this panel. Now, another interesting design choice from Smartisan is they went for a completely flat screen. This is a aesthetic choice that personally reminds me a little bit of Sony, as well as some earlier iPhones like the iPhone 4 or 4S. So a lot of the newer Android phones are marketing what's called 2.5D quote-unquote curved glass, which has a slight curve on the edges. If I do a quick comparison, this is the Xiaomi Redmi 5 Plus. You can see the slight lip, so that it might feel a little bit softer when you're swiping back and forth on the edges, but on here, it's a completely flat surface. It's definitely a bold design that matches, again, the angular shapes of the body and also the glass on the back. But as a whole, it makes the phone, again, feel quite substantial in the hand. But overall, it's still quite comfortable to grip, I would say, in the day-to-day. Phone call quality is also excellent on the Nut Pro 2. There are noise-canceling microphones, reception quality is strong, and it supports 4G LTE bands such as AT&T and T-Mobile's without any problems. So as a whole, it's excellent for making calls, and the earpiece is also very loud and crisp despite being hidden on the top slight curve of the glass. So it's very cleverly designed, and again, I had no complaints in my test calls. Reception was also good with 3 to 4 bars in the Seattle region. So one thing that's quite interesting about the Nut Pro 2, however, is Smartisan, for whatever reason, or maybe it's GearBest or the exporters, did not install the utility tools that you'd commonly find on any other smartphone. I'm quite surprised because Smartisan has a suite of many utility tools like alarm clocks, compasses, notes that they didn't install on the Nut Pro 2. So I actually had to install those myself from the Play Store. It's not a huge deal, but it's very strange that you would have to install manually something like an alarm clock or a clock at all. So this is the Smartisan designed alarm clock app that you can find on the Play Store. You can see the elegant user interface reminiscent of something designed by Apple or Oppo as well. So it seems like a fusion of the two. So a very clean interface that is aesthetically pleasing, but again, you do have to install that yourself. Same thing with the compass, you have to install that yourself, as well as the Smartisan Notes, which is also not pre-included. You can also take a look at the keyboard here, which is actually the stock kind of Google keyboard, which is nice to see. It's comfortable, it's easy to use, just because the display of the phone is very sensitive and supports up to 10 fingers for multi-touch. A test of the speaker quality on the Nut Pro 2. Alright, so pausing the audio there, the takeaway is the audio quality of the Nut Pro 2 is excellent. It's one of the better smartphone speakers I've tested, even though it doesn't pack stereo speakers, such as one on the earpiece and one on the bottom speaker actually has surprising depth and clarity. So there's a good kind of rumble in the lower frequencies. There's good bass response. There's even something called fake call, so you can set that up in the settings, but you can change the time, such as 30 seconds, 10 seconds, 1 minute, and someone will actually call you, fakely. and need some kind of distraction, but it's very convincing. You can change the profile name. I can answer it and turn on the speaker. And it's very interesting because you can also change the fake voice dialogue. You can change the language, such as Chinese, English. You can type in the type of response that you want. You can change the accent, the caller's gender. All of those things can be programmed, so it's actually quite convincing. And if it's calling, you can see that displayed in the background. I can end the call like that. So again, a very thoughtful feature that may be useful to some. Gaming performance is, as expected, very strong on this, just because the 660 really is a powerful chipset, especially on a mid-end phone that will more than handle all of your 3D titles and more complex games and will load up also very quickly. The 660 is also very energy efficient, as aforementioned, so it doesn't get hot, there's no thermal throttling, and it also drains power fairly slowly. So that's more or less it as far as our review of the Smartisan Nut Pro 2. I would say that if you're tired of seeing the same old Android phones with the same designs, the same software over and over again, then this is a great alternative to consider that also doesn't break the bank. At $400, it really is designed like a true flagship in terms of the attention to detail, which is really insane in terms of how they try to make everything look as minimalistic as possible while retaining a beautiful construction, a great performance overall with the Snapdragon 660, 6 gigs of RAM, and a lot of interesting features that are actually practical and quite useful. With that being said, it's definitely not a stock experience, and I think for the majority of users out there, arguably you'll be able to find more utility in a more stock device, especially ones that have Google Play services installed out of the box with access to things like Google Assistant and perhaps more support for software updates down the road. It's just this version exported, has tweaked software that might not be as attractive as it originally was, and certainly is a great quality alternative to the likes of Xiaomi, Huawei, as well as Meizu, other more petite and attractive smartphone manufacturers coming out of China. So you can check out more details about the Nut Pro 2 in our official article, but for now this has been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.